All right. Hello, my name is Benjamin Garcia, and welcome to Hack on the Hill 13. And today I will be teaching you the introductions to React Native. That didn't work. Okay. So before we begin, here is a link to the slides and the README. You can review these slides after the presentation is done, and then the README will have the code that I'll be working on today. Okay, so here's our agenda. First, we're going to start with introduction to React Native, and then we're going to look a little bit more into what we're building today, and then how to set up our environment. And then moving forward from that, we're going to be learning the core React Native components, state and interactivity, components and props, style sheets, and finally building the app. Okay, so what is React Native? So React Native is a framework for building mobile applications with JavaScript and React concepts. And we use mobile components such as view, text input, and flatlist, which will render array content. And it runs as a native app user interface. We will be using Expo Go if you don't have a simulator. And with that, setup and developing is much faster. So a good comparison is if you've worked with React or web development in the past, a div is comparable to a view, a paragraph tag is comparable to a text, and a button is comparable to a pressable. So why do this at all? Why React Native? So a very strong reason is because it's only one code base. One code base for iOS and Android, fast iteration through hot reload, and if you've used React in the past, a lot of those skills are transferable over into web development. Moreover, it's easy to build a minimum viable product with real interactivity and access to device features such as APIs, such as the camera and location. And, you know, a big ecosystem with a big community and the documentation, as I put it on the slides here, is available to read extensively if you'd like to continue more. So a little bit of fuel for motivation. The apps that use React Native commonly today, and you probably use them as well, things like Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Tesla, Shopify, Pinterest, Coinbase, and Microsoft all use React Native. Some more minimally, and some are, fully fledged products coded fully in React Native. Okay, so now that we've gone over a little bit about React Native, what are we actually building today? So today we are going to be building the Hack Checklist app. Wow. And this is um, a way for you to track your hackathon tasks during hackathon. And we'll build these four features live today. Adding a task, marking a task as done or undone, deleting a task, and displaying a task with flat list. As I've explained earlier, displays content on the page. And what we'll learn today are, again, like React Native core components, use state, which is a very important concept, even in React, components and props, and rendering arrays of data. So in our demo here, you can see that we can add a task, such as, we have to brainstorm three ideas for our hackathon idea, maybe assign tasks to our members, and finally say hello to ACM Hack. Okay. All right, so how do we set up our environment? This is the very important part. So installation wise, there is a lot of code editors out there. Most common ones there are like VS Code, more agentic ones such as Cursor and Windsurf. For disclosure, today I'll be using Windsurf to code our app. Node.js, which is used to run npm and expo commands. Think of it as sort of something to help you run things. Expo Go, which runs on your phone if you don't have a simulator. And for Mac users, you can use Xcode to run an iOS simulator as well as Android Studio if you want to run an Android emulator. Perfect. So let's go ahead and go into a folder of our choice. So we're going to navigate to a folder of our choice and open the terminal. Okay. So we're going to go, and we are going to, okay. So we're going to create a new Expo app with this npx command. So I'll give you a little bit to copy it, and I'll copy it as well. We're going to go into our folder. So this is Windsurf. This is one of the many code editors that you can use. And today I'm actually in the Hoth 13 workshops, and you can see all of our wonderful workshops that will be also presented by the wonderful staff here at ACM Hack. So of course today I'll be teaching you guys React Native. So I'm going to go ahead and cd into React Native. CD stands for a change directory. And now that I'm in here, we can go ahead and create our new Expo app. So it's important to note that for our template, I decided to use blank to teach you. This is just so it removes a lot of the filler, and we kind of operate in in two files technically. So we're gonna go ahead and create it. And as you can see, because I have Node, it's gonna run npm install, which is one of the packages. And let's give this a little bit to install. Sometimes it takes a little bit. But as you can see, it's starting to create this folder over here. And now that it's ready, now let's go ahead and cd into it. So we're gonna go ahead and copy this. We're gonna go ahead and change directory. We're gonna change directory into the Hawk Mini Workshop. And then from here, we can run this helpful command to start our simulator up through Xcode. Okay, perfect. Oops. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back in here. And so as you may have seen a little bit over there, it shows this whole terminal commands. So to run the app, so say you have Expo, you can just scan the QR code with Expo and it'll run it on your own mobile device. If you want to use an iOS simulator with Mac, you can just press I and then an Android emulator and press A. Of course, if this isn't enough, I have linked the documentation to show any and other of ways to run the app. Okay, perfect. Okay, so okay, let me go ahead and cancel this and let's run npx expo start again. And we can see that there's a whole interface here. So I'm going to be pressing I to run the iOS emulator. Let's see. Let's press Y here to run Expo Go version for iPhone 17 Pro. It takes a bit, it takes a little bit. Okay, cool. So there is our little app. This is what Xcode provides us. And just to make this easier for us, I'm going to go ahead and put this over here and then have this over here. Let's see. And, because we have the kind of, the bare bones version of a React Native app, there isn't really much to, look at. But we can see here, it says open up app.js to start working on our app. And so, yeah. Okay, perfect. Okay, cool. So now that we have our environment set up, let's go ahead and talk through some of the components that we'll be using today through the core React Native components. So in React Native, I may have mentioned previously how we don't really use HTML tags. Instead, we use things like view, which is like a layout container, like a div, text, which is a displayable text, pressable, which is like a tappable user interface, so think of like a button, text input, which is user input, and then flat list, which renders lists efficiently. And the components that we'll be using today are, view, which is a container for, layout and grouping UI elements, text, which displays text, text input, which lets users type a new task, pressable, which handles tabs. So today, like adding a task, talking if a task is complete or not, and just deleting a task fully. And then flat list, which renders a task list from an array of data. Okay, so how do they work together? So here on the left side of the screen, I have a mini example. So we see that there's a view tag, which wraps and groups the UI, a pressable tag, which responds to taps, and then a flat list, which renders items from a state, from like a task array. So our text input takes in a task, and then we press add to add it, and then in our flat list, we will have this task array. Okay, perfect. So moving on with our agenda, state and interactivity. So what even is state? Well, state is, think of it as like data that can change over time and update the user interface. So in our app, we have two states, which would be our input text, so what the user is typing, and then the tasks array, which is a list of tasks. So it's important to know that in our task array, each task will have an ID, a text, and then something called done, which is, think of it like a Boolean value, which it notes if a task is done or not. Um, Moving forward, we have use state, which is like how we actually input state or declare state. So we use React's use state hook, so it may look very similar or kind of verbatim to what is used in React today. So we have, const input text and then set input text, which is like an updater function. And then we have the use state, and we're setting that input text to empty. And then for the same as tasks, and then we're going to set that task variables to be an empty array. So how does input actually work? So in our code, we'll have like value is equal to brackets input text, and then close brackets, and then our UI reads from the state on change text, which is the same thing as well, which equal to bracket set input text and then close bracket and state updates when the user types. So it's very important to note that UI is a function of the state. So when state changes, React re-renders the user interface. And in this text input box, you can see that the value is equal to input text, on change text equal to set input text. So we're going to change the value of input text, and then there's a placeholder to kind of denote what we're going to build or what we can take from the user. Okay, so interactivity. So in our app, user interactions will call functions that update state. So adding a task will create a new object and insert it into tasks. Toggle task will update one task's done value, and then delete task, which removes a task from the array. So common array methods that we'll use today is map, which updates an item, filter, which removes an item, and a key principle about React and as an extension React Native is to not mutate state directly. Instead, let's create a new array and a new object and pass it to the updater function. So if we look, we have set tasks, and then prev is what React provides us with the previous state of the task. So the most recent state or the most recent task array. And then we're going to map over each task and then look for the ID. And if the ID is done, then we're going to put it in the task. Or if the ID isn't done, then we're going to put it in the array. And then if it is, then we're not going to. Um, Set tasks, which, the same thing here. We're going to have prev, and then we're going to place in the new task at the front of the array, and then at the end and then after that, all the previous tasks. And then lastly, for like deleting, we're going to filter out a task, and essentially, we're going to take out all the tasks or render the tasks that are not the ID. So it's important to note that, especially for like adding a variable to our array, we're going to have to create a new array and then pass it in. Okay, so components and props. So what is component? So a component is a reusable piece of the user interface. So why care, right? So an approach could be to just have like one long file, but then it would be difficult to iterate on, it would be difficult to read, and it'd be harder to debug. So why components help is that it breaks large user interfaces into smaller pieces. So it makes our code reusable and it makes code easier to read and maintain. For today, since we want to keep it more simpler, in our app, we're going to only have two components, or rather one component, and then app.js will be our main screen. And it'll handle all the states, and then task item.js is just one task row. What are props, right? So now that we've covered components, like what are props? So props are values passed from a parent component to a child component. In our app, the app file passes each task item, and the task item has a task, which is task data, on toggle, which functions um, a task as done or undone, on delete, which is a function to remove a task. So again, as showed previously, our task is item, and then on toggle is toggle task, and then on delete is delete task. So these are all functionalities of it. And in our task item, we pass in these props task on toggle on delete, and then we'd use the props inside of the function. So it's kind of like taking values. Okay, now that we have components of props, states, and interactivity, how do we actually style our app? How do we make it look pretty? So in React Native, there's nothing like Tailwind, which you can use inline. React Native styles are written as JavaScript objects, so not really CSS files. So we're going to define the style, right, as a const, and then you use the specific syntax style sheet.create, and then internally we have all of our classes, right, of our CSS. And then to apply the style, in our view, we just have style equal to the bracket of the styles, like inside of our styles, and we're going to target the container of it, or each class. So title or container. And the key differences from like CSS. So one, there's like no class name. Instead, you're just going to use style is equal to these brackets. Style names use camel case, so background, capital, color, font, capital size. Um, Layout is mostly flexbox, and styles usually live in the same file as the component, especially in smaller projects. Just as a small note for today, we'll be using minimal styling so we can focus on React Native concepts. As for the only styles we need today, because there is a lot of styles you can use. We'll be using layout, which with flex one, flex direction, row, and then align items with justify content. Spacing with padding, padding horizontal, padding vertical, margin, margin bottom, margin right. Text, font size, font weight, font color. Boxes with the buttons. Background color, border width, border color, border radius. Lists and rows, which would be border bottom width and border bottom color. Okay, so now that we've gotten over all our core components, states, interactivity, components, props, style sheets, let's build the app. So as you can see, I am in the Hoth Mini Workshop. And like I said before, we're going to have two components, or rather one component and our app.js. So a good practice is whenever you're working in React Native code bases to create a folder, just call it components. And here you'll be able to, in a sense, organize all your components. So this component will be called past item.js. And we have an empty file, but let's quickly think about, what this file is doing, what this component is doing. So at its core, this component is just going to be showing a row, and this row will be having our task. So just some boilerplate going on here. Import React from React. And we talked about previously the core React Native components. So we're going to be using, again, view, text, pressable, and then a style sheet, which is not a component, but rather our actual styles, which we will be working with in a little bit. Okay. Some more boilerplate here. We're going to be saying export default function and the actual component name, task item. And think of it as kind of like a function. A function must return something unless it's void. And inside of here, if you've worked with React in the past, you know that in a React return statement, it can only return like one tag. So here we're going to return a view. Okay. And this view will be our row. Okay. We're missing one thing here, which is going to be our actual components or our props, right? So um, things like the task, on toggle, and on delete. So these will be things we'll be using inside here. Okay. So now looking at kind of, what we want to have inside of here. Well, obviously we're going to need sort of a button to kind of denote if we're done or this task is incomplete. So we're going to have a pressable, right? And in this pressable, we're going to have another one inside here. We're going to have, and inside this pressable, we're going to have some text, right? And we're going to define this text. I'm just laying out sort of the boilerplate here, and we're going to have another text item, um, just to kind of this right here will be our task. Okay. So as I mentioned previously, each task will have an ID, a text, as well as like is done or not. So here we're going to say well task.text, right? And this kind of allows us to target the task, and then look at its text value. Okay. Now below this, we're going to need another pressable, right? And here, this will handle deleting the task from our app.js, right? So we're going to say delete. Okay, perfect. Now this includes all of the sort of text. Now we need to kind of work with actually like styles, right? So if you go back in our app.js here, you can see the syntax that I referred to earlier. So I'm gonna go ahead and copy this and then just don't go to no modules. Go down here and our style sheets, okay? Okay, perfect. So now we want to sort of, look at what we want to actually do here for our styles. So if you have worked with CSS in the past, you understand that we use these things called flex, right? So there's two ways to use flex. It can either be in a row or in a column. A row kind of puts things sequentially from left to right, and then a column again puts things sequentially from top down. So I guess to kind of no make that true, we want to have a row, and this will be a class, and we're going to say the row flex direction is going to be a row, right? Because it's going to be a task item. It's going to place things left to right. And then, just more like styling to work with here. We want to align items to be the center. And it's important to know that we have to use commas here, comma separated. The padding of it will be 10. So a little bit of space around the actual row itself. And the border bottom width will be just 1. And then lastly, the border bottom color, um, I'm going to say 3Es. And then we do a hashtag over here. Okay, perfect. It's just going to be sort of like off-white. Okay. All right, perfect. Oops. Now go again down here. So the actual like task area, I'm gonna go ahead and do this. And it'll be the same thing again, just flex direction row, and then it'll be like a text in the middle, and then um, more margin to the right to be able to create a little bit more spacing. So we're gonna say flex is 1, and the flex direction again here is going to be row again. And then down here, we're going to align items pretty similarly to the row class to be centered. And then as far as like margins, I'm going to go ahead and do a margin of right to kind of, have more margin to the right. Okay, perfect. So now we're going to go ahead and for our checkbox, um, we're going to, this one doesn't really have much styling to do with it, but we're just going to say the margin of right is also 8 to keep things, consistent. And then the font size will be 16, something manageable, not too big. Okay. Oops. Okay, so we're next thing we're gonna do is tackle like the text of the task, um, task text, and this one also not that different, just flex 1, and then font size of 16. Okay. And when we mark a task as done, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do a line through it, so kind of like a slash. Task text done. And this one right here. So like I said, a slash through it. So we say text decoration, uh, line, and we're going to say line through. Obviously, like CSS provides a lot of like predefined text decoration lines, but line through is one of them, which is perfect. And for the color, we're gonna do hashtag 777, which is a bit of a darker one, but it's important to note that let's communicate that this task isn't really touchable anymore. And as well as lastly, for our delete button, our background color is just gonna be let's think about this, F3, F3, F3. Oops. So, kind of off-white as well. Not too different, but it's still distinguishable. And then the border radius, 6. So kind of border radius kind of makes things like more rounded. And then like padding vertical to make a bit more a vertical gaps. Padding horizontal as well to keep things kind of spaced out. Okay, perfect. And then lastly, the text, and for here, we're just going to, in a sense, this is the text of like things that are deleted, or the color as well as the text. Okay, perfect. And it's going to be red because it's deleted. Okay. And the font weight of it would be 600. A little bit more bold. Okay. So this kind of handles all the CSS for us. Now we should look into actually how do we like import this? So for one, because of everything that we've defined here, let's go ahead and go in here and say style is equal to styles. Okay. And then, for the task area, we'll do styles is equal to styles.task area. And then down here, we'll do styles is equal to styles.check, right? Because this will be our checkbox, Um, and let's go ahead and work through, actually the code. So obviously nothing's rendering because we haven't inputted this, but um, an important like thing about JavaScript is like ternary operators. So we can look at, we can actually get the Boolean value, and we could say, well, this will like either evaluate to like true or false, right? Um, and if this is completed, then we can go ahead and get like let me get a check mark emoji right here. And if it's not completed, then we'll just have like a blank square, a white square, kind of denoting like a checkbox. So perfect. And then actually like going into, you know, using like on press and like toggling the task ID. So we can say like on press, we have like a callback function here, and we can say like on toggle task ID. So what this does is when we click it, it'll toggle the task ID to, in a sense, like toggle with the functionality. So going into our actual like task.text, again, using our styles, we want to go over here. And so it's important to know that like this task text is dynamic. So what will be happening is if we haven't interacted with it, it'll be like normal text. And then if it's done or it's check marked, then it'll have different styles. So React Native allows us to like kind of pass in like an array of like styles. So we can say styles at task text. So this is always going to evaluate the true, like this is always going to be here. And then we can again look at our task.done. So see if it's done, right? Well, if it's done, then we're also going to import styles at task done. So this is again like the Boolean and operator. So and only evaluates true if both sides are true. If we were to use or, then this wouldn't work out because it'll always have this one. Okay. So going into our pressable, our second one. So this is going to be our this will be our delete button. Okay. And again, similar to the above here. When we press it, what will happen is on delete, which is another one that React Native provides for us. We'll just say passive ID. It's going to delete it. And lastly here, we can do style is equal to styles dot delete text. Okay, so this is all routed up, and this is perfect. So again, nothing's really not too exciting yet, but just you wait. Okay, perfect. Okay, so app.js will be a bit more inflated because here we'll be handling our states as well as using our actual task item. So going up here, we're going to, well, we can actually kind of, copy this over. Okay, so we need to have a use state to be able to, um, what's happening here? Okay, so we're going to import React, and then we're also going to import a use state. And now we can actually see like things are kind of updating here. Again, go back down here, and we're going to import the functionalities that we're going to need. So it's going to be from React Native. We're going to be needing the view. We're also going to be needing, oh, view has already been declared. Okay, text, text input. What else do we need? Pressable, as well as like flat list, style sheet, and style sheet. So let's see what's happening here. So I believe these will need to be redeclared because these already have been okay. Going down here, we're going to also need to import um, like task item from, okay, so we're going to be importing the task item component. Task item. Then at this point, we can actually use it, right? So it's important to note, like we need to think about like our states, right? So what states do we actually need? We need one state for like the text that we need to input for like adding a task. So we're gonna say input text and then set input text. And then this will be just an empty string for now. Which will change we need to add, which will change we need to add a task. And then for like the actual task, we need another use state for our array, right? So, and we're going to say use state and then an empty array. Perfect. Okay, so now we need to tackle a bit of our functions, right? So like one of our functions is like adding a task. Another one is like toggling a task. And then after that is sort of like deleting a task. So in my opinion, I think the easiest one would be deleting a task. We can use JavaScript's map array function, which allows us to kind of like iterate through the array and then filter it against some function and then create a new array and then put those values into the array that satisfy the function. So we're going to pass in an ID, and from here, we're going to update the task array to say, well, we need to grab the most recent version of the array, and then we're going to say grab.filter task, right? And we're going to look at each value and say, well, does this task ID equal the ID that we want to delete, right? If it doesn't, then add it in there, and then if it does, then remove it, right? Let's see what's happening here. Filter. Oh, we're missing out something called a bracket here. Perfect. And okay, so going into the next one, I think like adding a task would be a good option here. Again, we're working through these functions like sequentially. So adding, so we have deleted done. Now we need to do like an add task, and we're going to do some like string parsing, or rather like string cleanup. So JavaScript has a built-in function for strings called trim. Now this will take our input text and you can trim it, which just removes any of the leading or trailing spaces. And if we deal with bad text, right? Say someone wanted to submit just like all spaces, then well, if that's empty, right? If trimmed is empty, then we're just gonna return. We're not gonna work with this function anymore. Okay, so now we're gonna create a new task, right? And what's going to be this task? Think of it as like an object, right? So the ID would be date.now, which is essentially just a nifty way to get a random value, but it's kind of just like the date today. Well, because this day will never occur again, or this time will never occur again for this date, it's always going to be unique. Okay. So then our text would be trimmed, which is the cleaned up text, the validated text, and then done, which is always going to be false because if you make a task, you can't be done with it before you finish it or before you start it, right? And after this, we're going to update tasks to be, prev. And then as we saw in the code before, we're going to use the spread operator to deconstruct our prev array to be iterable. And then we're going to add this new task in front of it. And then lastly, we're going to set input text to just be empty, right? We want to reset it, right? Lastly, we're gonna do a toggle of a task, right? So we want to toggle some tasks, and what we aim to do here is essentially have this task sort of be slasher, right? So what do we have to do? Well, obviously we have to again manipulate our set tasks array, and we're going to do a couple things. We're gonna map over it, and we're gonna take each task inside of it, and we're gonna say, okay, well, does this task ID equal the ID? If it does, then we're going to create a new task object. And we're going to essentially, look through the task previously. And then we're going to say, we're going to set its Boolean value done equal to its previous value negated, right? So this is a lot. So what is it doing? Okay, let's think about it, right? So we have a task object, right? For each task, we're checking, is this task ID equal to the ID we're looking for, right? If it is, right? So if that evaluates it true, then we're going to create a new object to put into our prev array, And we're going to use the spread operator to, again, go over the values like in the object, right? So it's going to look over ID, text, and then we're going to change done, right? We're going to change done to what, right? We're going to get the current task. We're going to access its Boolean value, say it's false, and we're going to set it to the negation of it, right? So it'll be what? True, right? And obviously, if this doesn't evaluate anything, then we're just going to add task back into the map or the array. So that concludes our functions, right? So we have delete task, add task, toggle task, all good. Now we're going to go ahead and actually um, write some code for input, right? So let's go here. And I'm going to go ahead and just delete this. I'm going to keep view styles container here. That's fine. And we're going to have some text, right? So let's see. We need to put this here. Oh, this. But that's what's happening. It was still here. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead with this. Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. Okay, cool. What's happening? Okay. So we're gonna have text, right? And in here, oh, she doesn't exist. A lot of debugging today. Okay. All right. So we're gonna have a title, right? So we're gonna say hack checklist. And then, and we can see it. There it is. Now we can do for a subtitle intro to React Native. Now, full preface, this is going to look a little bit ugly until we actually do the CSS, but don't worry, we'll get through that quickly. Okay, we're gonna have another view here, and this will actually be our input row. So like things we can this is gonna be our like text input, right? So we're gonna have a text input, and we can actually kind of chop this off early here like that, so that no code can redo it. Okay, so what is our value, right? Let's think about it. Input text, right? That's our value. On change of the text, what are we gonna do? We're gonna update set input text. We're gonna update the value, and then for a placeholder, we'll just say add a task, right? Dot, dot, dot. The style, we'll deal with this soon. Don't worry about that. We'll just say styles, or we'll actually we'll just submit this for now. And then return key type, done, right? So when we're done here, we're just gonna return done. And then on submit editing, we're gonna add the task, right? So we're gonna call this function, and then we're gonna add the task to our array. Pretty good. Okay, after that, we're gonna have another pressable tag here. And again, what are we gonna do here? We're gonna say on press is equal to add task. Okay. For our text, we're going to just say add. Okay. And you can see that now we can like type stuff here, but pretty cool, right? Okay. So then going down here, we're going to essentially we also want to render like how many tasks we have. I'm gonna say text, and we'll have some styles here. We'll do that soon. Then we can say tasks.length. So JavaScript has an array sort of function or kind of a property of it called length, which allows you to get like the amount of values in the array. And then here we can say task. And then, if it's only one, we just need to say like one task. But definitely an edge case will be if it isn't one, then we can just like put a colon S, right? 3 tasks. So pretty good. And lastly, so currently we have handled the input for a task, rendering how many tasks we have, as well as a header and a subtitle. Lastly, we want to use flat lists, which is a way we can render data. So going down here, we're going to say flat list, and then we're gonna chop it up early. And what is it? So what is actually our data, right? Our data is at its core tasks. And we're going to say the key extractor is the item. and then we're going to convert the item ID to a string, so it's like unique. And then how we're going to render these items? We're going to say, we're going to have this, and we're going to have each item here, and then we're going to go into kind of the return function, right? So we're going to say task item, right? And this is like us actually, this is our component that we have imported. It's our home bake component. And we're going to say, well, each task is equal to the item on toggle is equal to toggle task. And then on delete is equal to delete task. So we're strictly right here. We're just strictly filling out these props, and we're passing in these functions that we have declared here. Okay. Um, as far as our list empty component, right? So what happens if our list is empty? Oh no, right? We need to declare some text, right? And how are we gonna do that? Well, pretty simple. We'll just say no tasks yet. Add one above. Right? So there we go. So if we, wow, I was blocking him. I'm sorry. Go over here. We can see that it's not styled perfectly yet. We're not there yet, but um, we are pretty close. Okay. And zero tasks, all the good stuff. Okay. All right, so from here, we should say keyboard should persist taps. That's not a keyboard should persist taps is equal to handle. So this handles it. And then, the content container style is going to be equal to, we'll get that right now. Here we go. Okay, perfect. So let's go into our actual container styling and let's think about this. So for a container, we want to essentially, we're gonna have the container here, and then we're gonna render tasks inside of it. So we want some padding on the top so we can, the dynamic island isn't blocking everything. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove all this. This is boilerplate. You could say padding horizontal is 16, right? Padding on the sides. And then padding top is 70. Perfect. Okay. Lastly, or not lastly, we got a long way to go. So title. Okay, what should our title be? Title styling is a good question. Well, we want to make it big, so 24, and the font weight a little bit bold. We'll say, oh shoot, we'll say 700. Perfect. Oh, that's a color. Okay. For our subtitle, right? We'll say the color is going to be 666. Oh no, that's not. It's okay. Margin top going to be 2. Margin bottom is going to be 12. So what is happening here? We have some margins on the top and margins on the bottom to kind of give more space. Okay, cool. Let's do input row. And let's say, okay, flex direction. Let's get back into it, right? Left to right sequentially. And then margin bottom for our inputs. We have a little bit more space to actually to kind of have things. Okay, what is erroring here? Oh, let me just actually no. I want to save it for a surprise. Okay. Um, input is going to be flex 1, border width going to be 1 again, border color is going to be CCC, and then border radius going to be 8, padding horizontal it's going to be 10, padding vertical is going to be 10 as well, so kind of like the same padding on each side, and then margin right will be 8. Okay. Moving forward, our add button. Oops. So let's think about what we want to achieve here. So this will be our button to add stuff into the array. So we want the background color of it to be 1. And then our border radius, 8. So more of a circle. Padding horizontal, be 14. And then we're going to justify the content of the button to be center. And then we're going to align items as well to be center. Perfect. Just what we want. Okay. And then for like the actual text itself inside the button, nothing crazy here. Oops. Do hashtag FF. And then we're going to do font weight to be 600. Okay, I'm going to do count text. So this is like the count of the amount of variables in our array, which would be color, hashtag 4. Margin bottom should be 6. And then for like actual list content, almost done. Like the styling for it, nothing hard here, just a padding on the bottom. Okay, kind of like giving it some space to work with. And then as far as your empty text goes, um, nothing much to worry about here. Oops. 777, and then padding vertical, be 12, and then text align to be center. Okay. Now that we have the CSS done, let's plug it in. Okay. So boom, gonna go here for our text. We have our title. Okay. Here we have our subtitle. Oh shoot. Here we have let's uncomment this. Our input. And then for our pressable here, we'll have styles dot add button. And then here we'll say add button text. Okay. All right, for sure. And then down here, we're going to say this will be count text. Okay. For our flat list, we'll say down here styles dot list content. Okay. So let's look at it through one more time. Let's see. Oh, and then here we'll have styles dot empty text. And then over here, let's see. Okay. What are we missing? Let's see. Also container, styles dot title. And then this view should be but okay, cool. So now we have somewhere to kind of track our progress through through Hack on the Hill. So say we're on the same team, and like our first task together is we have to learn React Native, right? We can add it over here, and now we have a task, right? We can do this first, we can do this last, we can do whatever we want. Say, say we have to get lunch, right? Keep the brain fueled up. Boom. And then finish that one. We're hungry. Okay. And we can just delete it. Like it doesn't really matter now. Delete it. Okay. So congratulations. You now have something to track your progress throughout Hack on the Hill. Now go hack.